3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to the Fighting Moose Podcast. I'm your host and narrator, Jason Hendrickson. This is a podcast where I retell stories, some fictional and some historical, that can be enjoyed by people of all ages. The other day, John and I were driving down the road when we saw Longlegs the Heron land in the creek by the house. We stopped and checked him out for a little while he was just strutting around in the creek. So today, I went in search of a heron story for Longlegs. I think I have read all the stories from Mr. Burgess, and I only found stories about cranes from Mrs. Clara Dillingham Pierson. So today, we read the story titled The Dance of the Sandhill Cranes from the book that Mrs. Pierson wrote titled Among the Pond People. In addition to watching Longlegs, I showed John a spot to sit to just enjoy nature on the creek bank. He liked it, and I think that we are going to try to spend a little more time down there enjoying nature. So in closing, I guess I can challenge you with finding a spot out in nature where you can sit down and hang out and enjoy the natural world around you. Now, let's turn to today's story. I hope you enjoy. Let's begin.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The Dance of the Sandhill Cranes. One fine day in spring, a great flock of sandhill cranes came from the south. They were flying high and quietly because the weather was bright. If it had been stormy, or if they had been flying by night, as they usually did, they would have stayed nearer the ground, and their leader would have trumpeted loudly to let his followers know which way he was going. They would also have trumpeted, but more softly, to tell him that they were coming after. They were a fine company to look upon, orderly, strong, and dignified. Their long necks were stretched out straight ahead, their long legs straight behind, and they beat the air with slow, regular strokes of the strong wings. As they came near the pond, they flew lower and lower until all swept down to the earth and alighted, tall and stately, by the edge of the water. They had eaten nothing for several days and were soon hunting for food, some on land and some in the water, for they had stopped to feed and rest. Those who hunted in the water did so very quietly. A crane would stand on one leg, with his head against his breast, so quietly that one might think him asleep. But as soon as anything edible came near, he would bend his body, stretch out his neck, open his long, slender bill, and swallow it at one gulp. Then he would seem to fall asleep again. While most of the cranes were still feeding, some of them were stalking through the woods and looking this way and that, flying up to stand on a tree, and then flying down to stand on the ground. They were those who thought of staying there for the summer. When the flock arose to fly on again, 8 cranes stayed behind. They watched their friends fly away and stood on the ground with their necks and bills uplifted and mouths open while they trumpeted or called out, "Goodbye, stop for us in the fall." The flying cranes trumpeted back, "We will, don't forget us." That night they slept near together, as they had done when with the large flock, and one crane kept awake to watch for danger while the others tucked their heads under their wings. They were fine looking even when they slept, and some people never look well unless they are awake. They were brownish gray, with no bright markings at all, and their long legs gave them a very genteel look. The tops of their heads were covered with warty red skin, from which grew short black feathers that looked more like hairs. One morning, when the cranes awakened, a fine young fellow began to strut up and down before the rest, bowing low and leaping high into the air, and every now and then whooping as loud as he could. The gulls, who had spent the winter by the pond, screamed to each other, "The crane dance has begun!" Even the frogs, who are afraid of cranes, crept quietly near to look on. It was not long before another young crane began to skip and hop and circle around, drooping his wings and whooping as he went. Every crane danced, brothers and sisters and all, and as they did so, they looked lovingly at each other and admired the fine steps and enjoyed the whooping. This went on until they were so tired they could hardly stand and had to stop to eat and rest. When they were eating, the young fellow who had begun the dance stalked up to the sister of one of his friends as she stood in the edge of the pond, gracefully balanced on one leg. She did not turn her head towards him, although, having such a long and slender neck, she could have done so with very little trouble. She stood with her head on her breast and looked at the water. After a while, he trumpeted softly, as though he were just trying his voice. Then she gave a pretty little start and said, "Oh, are you here? How you did frighten me." "I am sorry," he said. "I did not want to frighten you." And he looked at her admiringly. "It was just for a minute," she answered. "Of course, I am not frightened now that I know who it is." Then they stood and fished for a long time without saying anything. When she flew away, she said, "That is a very pleasant fishing place." He stood on the other leg for a while and thought how sweet her voice sounded as she said it. Then he thought that, if she liked the place so well, she might come there again the next day. He wondered why he could not come too, although everybody knows that a crane catches more if he fishes alone. The next morning, when the cranes danced, he bowed to her oftener than to any of the rest, and he thought she noticed it. They danced until they were almost too tired to move, and indeed he had to rest for a while before he went to feed. As she stalked off toward the pond, she passed him, and she said over her shoulder, "I should think you would be hungry. I am almost starved." After she had gone, he wondered why she had said that. If he had been an older crane and understood the ways of the world a little better, he would have known that she meant, "Aren't you coming to that fishing place? I am going now." Still, although he was such a young crane and had never danced until this year, he began to think that she liked him and enjoyed having him near. So he flew off to the fishing place where he had seen her the day before, and he stalked along to where she was and stood close to her while she fished. Once, when he had caught something and swallowed it at one gulp, she looked admiringly at him and said, "What fine big mouthfuls you take." That pleased him, of course, because cranes think that big mouthfuls are the best kind. So he tipped his head to one side and watched his neck as the mouthful slid down to his stomach. He could see it from the outside, a big bunch slowly moving downward. He often did this while he was eating. He thought it was very interesting. He pitied short-necked people. Then he said, "Pooh, I can take bigger mouthfuls than that. You ought to see what big mouthfuls I can take." She changed and stood on her other leg. "I saw you dancing this morning," she said. Now it was not at all queer that she should have seen him dancing, for all the 8 cranes had danced together, but he thought it very wonderful. "Did you notice to whom I bowed?" he asked. He was so excited that his knees shook, and he had to stand on both legs at once to keep from falling. When a crane is as much excited as that, it is pretty serious. "To my sister?" she asked carelessly as she drew one of her long tail feathers through her beak. "No," said he, "I bowed to her sister." He thought that was a very clever thing to say, but she suddenly raised her head and said, "There, I have forgotten something," and flew off, as she had done the day before. He wondered what it was. Long afterward, he asked her what she had forgotten, and she said she couldn't remember, that she never could remember what she had forgotten. It made him feel very badly to have her leave him so. He wanted a chance to tell her something, yet whenever he tried to, it seemed to stick in his bill. He began to fear that she didn't like him, and the next time the cranes danced, he didn't bow to her so much, but he strutted and leaped and whooped even more. And she strutted and leaped and whooped almost as loud as he. When they were all tired out and had stopped dancing, she said to him, "I am so tired. Let us go off into the woods and rest." You may be very sure he was glad to go, and as he stalked off with her, he led the way to a charming nesting place. He didn't know just how to tell what he wanted to, but he had seen another crane bowing to her, and was afraid she might marry him if he was not quick. Now he pointed with one wing to this nesting place and said, "How would you like to build a nest there?" She looked where he had pointed. "I?" she said. "Why, it is a lovely place, but I could never have a nest alone." "Let me help you," he said. "I want to marry and have a home." "Why," said she as she preened her feathers, "that is a very good plan. When did you think of it?" So they were married, and Mrs. Sandhill Crane often told her friends afterward that Mr. Crane was so much in love with her that she just had to marry him. They were very, very happy, and after a while, but that is another story.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fighting Moose podcast. Please join us next time as we read another exciting story. Today's music was provided by the artist Analog by Nature, and the audio clips were provided from NASA. For more information to download and or listen to audio or materials from all our recordings, or to contact us, please visit www.thefightingmoose.com, or you can follow the links in the show notes. If you enjoy the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcast or on iTunes, and tell a friend. Thank you for your patronage, and as always, try and do a random act of kindness every day.
Mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle earned its place in history.